I'm standing
Tulsi
here in the
Gabbard,
back
the
corner
director
a
of
White House
National
hallway that
Intelligence,
still
is there
smells
to
like
deliver
hairspray
it.
and
But
cold
despite
coffee,
its name, Trump
watching
isn't the
latest
only
drama
one she's
unfold
talking.
like a political soap opera that refuses to get canceled. And I'm realizing I've finally reached the point where I can't pretend this circus is normal anymore. So let me just introduce myself before the chaos swallows us again. I'm the unlucky person who keeps ending up in the room when Donald Trump's foreign policy improvisations
After
collide
that,
with reality.
he goes back to the workplace
And right
for
now,
more
I'm
executive
observing him
time
pacing
and the
in circles,
impromptu
as
meetings
if the
and phone
carpet
calls that
personally
come with
offended
it.
him,
For the
muttering something
PDB.
about how everyone's
After that, it's a
overreacting
unique
to what he
end to the Trump
insists is
work
a
week. The
brilliant
president's
peace
votes
plan,
only come
while
later
his
in the
staff
day.
hover behind
If he
him
still
with the
has
same
time
look
after
you'd
reading
see
through
on
his
flight
luxury
attendants
news
during
bag and
turbulence.
posting on Truth
And as I'm
Social,
watching this,
he's
I'm
watching
thinking, of course we're here again, plunged into another scandal that feels less like breaking news and more like a recurring nightmare in which the plot never changes. Only the excuses do. Trump is insisting, loudly, that he's being misunderstood as he always is, blaming everyone from the deeply ungrateful Europeans to unnamed congressional backstabbers who apparently don't appreciate
and it dominates the day from here on out. Like in The Art of the Deal, Trump uses this
wondering how he still hasn't grasped that nothing screams innocence like shifting your story twice before lunch. J.D. Vance is standing a few feet away, wearing the expression of someone who thought he'd be playing statesman and somehow ended up trying to mop up a mess he didn't create but now totally owns. And he keeps rubbing
Trump
the back
calls
of his
French
neck like he's
President
replaying
Emmanuel
the leaked call in his
Macron.
mind.
The two heavily
The one
disagree
where he
over
tried
NATO and
unsuccessfully
Ukraine
to convince
funding.
furious lawmakers that no, they're not witnessing the administration, freelancing foreign policy straight from Moscow's Pinterest board. Meanwhile, Trump is waving his hands and insisting he's the victim of hysterical overreaction, which is rich coming from a man who once stormed out of a meeting because someone didn't compliment him fast enough. And I'm just staring at him, absorbing every contradiction, every spontaneous detour, every moment of suspended logic, wondering how he can talk about American strength while outsourcing his talking points with the subtlety of a bad spy movie. Marco Rubio Bargesi next, breathless like he sprinted over after hearing his name in a sentence that didn't include praise, and he's trying to align himself with whatever Trump's angle is today. But the moment he opens his mouth, it's painfully obvious he doesn't know whether he's supposed to defend the plan, redefine the plan, or pretend the plan never existed. And in this cramped space, with aides whispering panicked updates about senators demanding answers and allies abroad demanding sanity, I'm just watching Trump insist that the chaos proves he's right, as though confusion is a form of strategy. But the thing is, I'm here, watching his face twist every time someone mentions the words Russian influence. And it's impossible not to see the flicker, just a flicker of irritation or embarrassment, or some internal scramble to land on a new explanation. He hasn't already burned through. The hallway feels tighter with every passing minute, voices rising, excuses multiplying like fruit flies. And I'm thinking this whole operation is being held together by caffeine, denial, and whatever fragile thread of loyalty hasn't snapped yet, while Trump keeps insisting that this is what strength looks like, even as the people around him look like they're bracing for impact. And right when he's gearing up for another monologue about how the media is out to get him, someone slips him a note that clearly doesn't say anything comforting, because he freezes mid-sentence, glances at Vance, and whispers loud enough for all of us to hear, "Fix it." And that's the moment I realize we're only at the beginning of this unraveling, with the real storm just starting to rumble down the hall. J.D. Vance is already moving before Trump finishes hissing that order at him, practically speed-walking down the corridor with the stiff panic of a man who's trying to look in control while internally calculating how many careers are about to die in the blast radius. And I'm keeping pace a few steps behind, watching him rehearse some vague reassurance under his breath that he clearly doesn't believe. He pushes into a side room where a cluster of lawmakers are waiting, arms crossed, jaws tight, giving off the unmistakable energy of people who've just discovered they were voluntold into defending a foreign policy plan that looks suspiciously like it was drafted in a Moscow basement. The air is thick with irritation the moment JD steps inside, and he tries to break the tension with a strained, "Let's walk through this rationally," which is immediately met with a senator snapping, "Rationally left the building the second this plan leaked," and JD's mouth twitches in that way people get when they're wondering why they didn't choose a normal job, like accounting or anything involving fewer flamethrowers. What's wild is how he keeps starting sentences with the confidence of a man who expects to be interrupted, and he's right every time. Because no one here is buying the idea that this wasn't crafted to benefit one side and one side only, and every time someone says Russia, he does this tiny flinch like he's being sprayed with cold water. Meanwhile, I'm leaning against the doorframe, observing every micro-expression, every forced smile, every half-swallowed explanation that's supposed to make this look less like a strategic disaster and more like a misunderstood masterpiece. The lawmakers are pressing him. How did this get approved? Who reviewed it? Why does it read like it bypassed every normal channel? And JD is scrambling, not lying necessarily, just rearranging the truth with enough speed to make it unrecognizable, insisting that Trump's intentions are being taken out of context, as though context is some magical force field that keeps reality from touching him. And while JD is fumbling through his talking points, Marco Rubio pops in again, because apparently his survival mechanism is to appear wherever damage control is happening. Though judging by his expression, even he's realizing he walked into a room full of people who look ready to mutiny if they hear one more word about strong leadership. If you came stew-eyed. The mood gets even darker when someone mentions allies already calling privately and demanding explanations, and JD's eyes dart around like he's searching for an exit that doesn't exist, because he knows, as do all of us watching, that nothing spooks this administration like external pressure. They can't bully, charm, or distract with a rally. And as the voices rise, overlapping, frustration spilling over, I'm noticing Trump's staff outside the door, texting furiously, whispering into earpieces, the whole place humming like an engine overheating, because the spin machine is failing to catch up with the speed of the meltdown, and the cracks that everyone's been pretending not to see are widening. JD keeps insisting that the president's plan is being mischaracterized, but the words are starting to sound like background noise, the way an air conditioner rattles on its last legs, and a congressman finally snaps. We're tired of cleaning up after him, which hits the room like a dropped plate, silencing everyone for a beat before the arguing roars back even louder. And there I am, standing in the middle of this storm, watching the administration's foreign policy apparatus unravel in real time, watching fear mix with fury, watching loyalty slip through people's fingers, and thinking that if Trump imagined J.D. Vance was going to put out this fire, he miscalculated badly because the flames are already licking up the walls, and the people trapped inside are starting to realize the exits might be blocked. I follow J.D. Vance out of that heated room as he escapes with the energy of someone pretending they simply moving on to the next briefing, when really he's just trying not to suffocate in the cloud of disbelief he left behind, and I watch him march down the hallway like he's hoping momentum alone will erase the fact that the senators practically carved him into confetti. Marco Rubio trails behind him, peppering him with nervous questions about messaging and optics, as if this whole fiasco is a branding issue rather than what it obviously is, the political equivalent of handing a live grenade to a toddler and hoping for maturity. JD stops so abruptly that Rubio nearly walks into him, and in this little alcove near the Roosevelt room, JD starts whispering furiously about needing a unified front, which is hilarious because I can practically hear the cracks in that front, widening each time someone in the building checks their phone and sees another lawmaker publicly dragging the administration for proposing what looks suspiciously like a surrender gift basket to Russia. And as they argue in these low, frantic tones, I glance over and see Trump's communications people spiraling, the ones who were chirping just yesterday about how the plan will speak for itself, now pacing, red-faced, slamming laptops shut because the plan is speaking. All right, and what it's saying is, you cannot spin your way out of this one. Every aide who swore hours ago that this was a strong position is now working overtime to pretend they never said a word, and I'm standing here watching the panic metastasize, spreading floor by floor like someone pulled a fire alarm, labeled, Russian talking points confirmed. That's when I hear Trump before I see him, the heavy footsteps, the theatrical sighing, the tone of someone preparing a grievance monologue until he turns the corner and enters the fray with that unmistakable mix of defiance and wounded pride, demanding to know why everyone's getting hysterical over nothing. Which is an interesting choice of words considering he's the one who almost knocked over a podium earlier after hearing the leak had gone public. JD stiffens the second. Trump arrives, like a kid bracing for a parent's report card lecture. But Trump barely looks at him. He's too busy ranting to an aide about how he's being slandered by ungrateful allies and sabotaged by weak Republicans. and he keeps swinging his arm in these grand arcs as if he's conducting an orchestra made entirely of self-pity. I'm watching him closely because this is the part Trump always claims is leadership. The chest puffing, the deflection, the insistence that only he sees the big picture while everyone else is tragically stuck in the shallow end. But beneath all that bluster, there's this unmistakable flicker of irritation, maybe even fear. Every time JD timidly says words like lawmakers or backlash or credibility, Rubio tries to jump in, offering something that sounds like a suggestion but is really more of a plea, proposing they clarify the plan's intent before international partners misinterpret it any further. And Trump stops, stares at him, and in a tone that could peel paint off a wall says, "There's nothing to clarify. They should be thanking us." And the silence that follows is the kind of silence only produced by a room full of grown adults, desperately pretending they didn't just hear something that will haunt them during their ethics hearings. JD glances at me as if I'm going to rescue him or offer a seatbelt, but all I do is raise an eyebrow because I'm just the witness here, the one absorbing every moment of this slow-motion collapse, watching the president insist the real problem is messaging, while his staff look like they're standing on the deck of a sinking ship, clutching brooms instead of lifeboats. Then, out of nowhere, an aide rushes in with breaking updates. More congressional Republicans are publicly demanding firings, allies are leaking their own concerns to the press, and one foreign official apparently referred to the plan as strategically incomprehensible, which makes Trump bark out a laugh. One of those brittle, hollow laughs that sounds like it hurts on the way out, and he mutters something about fake outrage from weak countries before ordering JD to fix the narrative immediately. JD nods automatically, even though it's obvious from the tightness in his jaw that he has no idea what fixing the narrative even means at this point. And as Trump storms off again, I follow JD and Rubio toward the West Wing briefing lounge, listening to Rubio whisper that they need to get ahead of this before it mutates. And JD mutters back that it's already mutated beyond recognition. The panicked tapping of phones, the hurried shuffling of papers, the spin drafts being rewritten on the fly. I'm watching all of it as we move, the whole operation visibly buckling. And just as JD is about to step into another room of anxious staffers, he pauses, closes his eyes for a brief second like he's trying to summon a courage he doesn't actually possess, and when he opens them again, the exhaustion hits his face like a spotlight. This is a man who realized far too late that Trump didn't hand him responsibility. He handed him the detonator. JD Vance steps into that briefing lounge with the same doomed determination you see in people who agree to just check the attic in horror movies, and the room instantly quiets. Dozens of staffers turning toward him with that expression that's part desperation, part expectation, and entirely unfair, because everyone here knows he inherited a disaster, but they're all pretending he's the one who can reverse engineer sanity out of a plan that already detonated across half the planet. I slip in behind him, taking my usual post near the wall, observing how nobody is even pretending to multitask anymore. Every laptop screen is frozen on headlines, social feeds, and statements from elected officials whose patience is evaporating in real time. JD clears his throat, an unnecessary gesture because the room is already silent, but his voice cracks just slightly when he begins explaining that the administration needs to take control of the narrative, which immediately prompts one aide to mutter, not quietly enough, "There is no narrative, there's just fallout. It's really progressant." And JD hears it, winces, and presses forward anyway, trying to project the authority of someone who has a plan when it's obvious he doesn't even have a direction. Only a growing list of people demanding answers he can't give. Then he begins rehearsing his line about misinterpretations of the peace proposal. But the staff interrupts in waves. One brings up European allies calling the plan destabilizing. Another mentions intelligence analysts comparing the language to old Kremlin drafts. And yet another reads aloud a new statement from a prominent Republican declaring the administration's foreign policy embarrassing, prompting several people to groan like they've just been punched. JD tries to regain footing, insisting again, without conviction that these reactions stem from lack of full context. And I'm watching him cling to that phrase like it's a flotation device. Even though everyone here can see the ship has already split in half. The door swings open, and in walks Trump's press secretary, looking like she's been dragged through 5 different crisis meetings and lost all of them. She drops a folder on the table and announces, "The president wants us to emphasize strength, which triggers a round of exchanged glances that practically scream, "Strength isn't the issue." The issue is the plan sounds like something Moscow would fax over at 2 in the morning. JD stiffens again, nodding mechanically, and starts outlining a talking point strategy so vague it could apply to any scandal in any administration in any century. But before he can finish, Marco Rubio slips in, whispering urgently that international reporters are now pressing for the documents behind the plan and we cannot stall them much longer, which lands like a thunderclap in the already trembling room. JD mutters something under his breath, something that sounds like an apology to himself, then launches into a pep talk about staying disciplined, though it comes out more like a man trying to convince a crowd not to flee a burning building because fire is actually warm if you think about it. ADUs. I'm watching everyone's faces as he speaks, strained smiles, twitching eyelids, clenched jaws, and I'm thinking that this room isn't brainstorming anymore, it's bracing. Then the door bursts open again, and Trump storms in with all the grace of a man who believes volume is a leadership skill, ranting about fake outrage, weak allies, and traitorous Republicans. And the room freezes as he demands why nobody has fixed this yet, as though fixing requires only enthusiasm and a willingness to ignore cause and effect. JD tries to speak, but Trump barrels over him, insisting he won't retreat, won't apologize, won't clarify, won't listen, and certainly won't admit the possibility that the outrage might be proportional. He keeps insisting the plan is perfect, strong, smart, and misunderstood, rotating between those words like a malfunctioning carousel. Rubio attempts to interject with a diplomatic suggestion, but Trump snaps something sharp and dismissive, and Rubio retreats instantly, staring at the floor as if he's hoping it swallows him whole. And as Trump escalates, pacing, gesturing, inventing phrases mid-sentence, the staff nod like bobbleheads in a windstorm, even though none of them look convinced, just trapped. I'm standing there absorbing all of it, absorbing the tension, the fear, the exhaustion, the grotesque theater of it all. Watching JD shrink smaller with every accusation Trump throws his way, watching Rubio silently rewrite his own future regrets, watching aides desperately pretend this is all manageable, while Trump keeps insisting that the only problem here is disloyal messaging. Finally, Trump spins toward JD and demands, "Are you handling this or not?" And JD, who at this point looks like a man running purely on adrenaline and caffeine fumes, straightens up, swallows hard and says, "Yes, Mr. President," even though everyone in the room, including Trump, knows he absolutely is not handling anything except the rapidly spreading realization that he was handed responsibility without power, blame without control, and a crisis without exit routes. Trump leaves as abruptly as he entered, muttering about scheduling a televised statement no one asked for, and the room collapses into frantic whispers again. JD wipes his face with both hands, realizing he must now convince the world that the implosion they're witnessing is actually strategic brilliance, and Rubio taps out a message on his phone like he's already crafting his distance. And as they shuffle toward the next makeshift war room, phones buzzing, tempers fraying, loyalty disintegrating, I follow quietly, watching the cracks widen, watching the narrative slip away, watching this administration sink deeper into the quicksand of its own contradictions. And I know we're far from done. Unraveling, there's still more to witness in the next room, the next hour, the next breath, because the panic isn't slowing, it's multiplying. I trail JD Vance and Marco Rubio as they move down the hallway with that stiff, mechanical gait people get when they're running on adrenaline instead of direction. And the fluorescent lights overhead buzz like they're mocking the whole procession, flickering just enough to make the moment feel even more like a slow-motion disaster documentary. JD pushes into yet another cramped conference space where the administration's foreign policy aides have gathered, and the room instantly fills with the uneasy rustle of documents, hushed conversations, and the strained composure of people who know their fingerprints are now on a crisis they didn't create but can no longer escape. I position myself near a corner, watching everything unfold like a living autopsy of an administration that keeps insisting it's in perfect health, even as its organs are visibly failing. JD tries to sound assertive this time, his voice louder, his posture straighter, but the words coming out of his mouth carry that unmistakable desperation of someone performing confidence instead of feeling it. He's repeating the same lines about misinterpreted context and strong intentions. But now even the staffers who pretended to believe him earlier are exchanging glances that hover somewhere between exhaustion and resignation. One advisor raises their hand, not hesitantly but defiantly, and asks the question nobody else wants to touch. "Sir, what happens when our allies release their own documentation? Their own calls? Their own readouts?" And JD freezes for a moment, blinking rapidly like he's buffering, because he knows everyone knows there's no version of this where other countries keep quiet out of respect for Trump's political comfort. Rubio jumps in, trying to plug the hole with suggestions about coordination and unified messaging, but even he sounds like a man pitching sandbags to hold back a flood that's already in the living room. The aides continue pressing. What about members of Congress announcing public inquiries? What about the foreign leader privately threatening to hold a press conference? What about the analysts describing the plan as strategically incoherent? And JD keeps answering with these vague, half-constructed phrases that crumble as soon as they leave his lips, each one sounding like a chipped fragment of a plan he never actually had. The room shifts abruptly when an aide enters carrying a tablet, face pale, explaining that another major network is about to run a segment featuring new GOP criticism, and the quote they read aloud makes half the room swear under their breath. A senior Republican calling the administration's handling of the situation a humiliating chapter in American foreign policy. Is form. JD's jaw tightens, Rubio looks nauseated, and the staff collectively exhales like a single organism hit with a gut punch. JD mutters that they need to get ahead of it, which prompts another aide to snap back that we can't get ahead of something we're still causing. And JD flinches so visibly, it cuts through the room. He tries to pull the conversation back to messaging, to discipline, to reframing, but it's clear that every new attempt at spinning the story only drags them deeper into its quicksand. Then the door opens again and Trump reappears, this time calmer but somehow even more dangerous in his composure, acting like a man who has convinced himself that denial is a strength and frustration is a strategy. He doesn't yell this time. He just announces what he calls his solution, a televised address, and the room collectively freezes because they all know what that means. Whatever smoldering fire they're dealing with now is about to meet a flamethrower. JD tries to suggest they prepare a draft or align with allies first, but Trump waves him off with a dismissive flick of his hand, saying, "I know what I'm going to say," and the entire room visibly stiffens, the way people do when they realize they're standing on a fault line right as the ground begins to shift. Rubio tries again, gently, cautioning that the reaction might not be what Trump expects, but Trump ignores him and launches into an unfiltered preview of what he plans to tell the nation. A disjointed rant involving ungrateful countries, corrupt elites, heroic instincts, and vague threats posed by fools who don't understand strength. The staff stare at him like they're watching a man rearrange furniture on a sinking ship while insisting the waterline is fake news. When Trump finishes and exits once more, the room erupts, not in shouting but in movement. Aides scrambling for phones, rushing to draft crisis memos, whispering to each other with the frantic energy of people trying to prevent a train wreck already in progress. JD leans heavily on the edge of the table, eyes closed, letting out a strained breath that says he's finally realizing the full weight of the assignment Trump dumped on him. Rubio stands beside him, rubbing his temples, mumbling something about damage beyond repair, and the room swirls with the frantic, chaotic choreography of too many people trying to solve too many problems with too little power. I watch all of it, every tremor, every failure, every sinking face, every flicker of dread, and I can feel the narrative shifting beneath their feet, slipping away, reshaping itself into something none of them can control. And as JD pushes himself upright, preparing to chase after Trump yet again, still pretending there's some version of this he can salvage, I follow him out of the room, because this unraveling isn't finished, not even close, and whatever comes next is already echoing down the hall, pulling us deeper into the chaos of an administration devouring itself in real time, leaving everyone scrambling to pretend the flames aren't already licking the walls.